everybody. This is James Diboe, the Sculptor, dedicated to regional peoples as always. And we've got a special guest in from South Africa, Elelwani. How are you doing, my sister? You okay?
I am doing well. Thank you, James, for having me.
Great to have you on anyway. Now, I understand I'm going to speak a bit about your profession and a bit about the history of South Africa. Now, I understand that you are a part of the student affairs.
Yes, so I am currently the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Transformation, Student Affairs, and Social Responsiveness for the University of Cape Town.
Oh, interesting. Great place. I was there 2 years ago, like I was telling you before. I really liked Cape Town. And, where did it all begin? How long have you been, was you studying for? How long have you been involved in what you've been doing?
Yes, so I grew up partly in a township just outside Pretoria. So a township is a place where during apartheid, Black people stayed in order to be close to their places of work. And it was a highly regulated population because the apartheid government then did not want too many Black people living in the city. But when I was 8, my family moved to rural parts of South Africa, so all the way up north, bordering with Zimbabwe. And that's where I grew up and did my high school. After that, I came to the University of Cape Town, which is all the way to the south in Cape Town, the south of South Africa. I did a degree in occupational therapy, so a Bachelor of Science in occupational therapy. After that, I went back and I worked in the rural area where I grew up. It is called Venda. And then after 3 years, I moved to the US. I worked in Florida for 2 years, but then I was headhunted to come back to the University of Cape Town to join the academic staff. And so I've been here since 1998. I did my master's, I did my doctoral studies, and I served in many capacities. At one point, I was the head of occupational therapy, and I also became deputy dean for the postgraduate studies or postgraduate education in the Faculty of Health Sciences. The Faculty of Health Sciences is where we teach those who study towards medicine to become physicians, but also occupational therapists, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and audiologists. But I took on the role of Deputy Vice Chancellor in 2022. But I think the other thing to mention, which is important, is that after the Rose Must Fall protest at the University of Cape Town, when the Cecil John Rhodes statue was removed, I was asked by the then Vice Chancellor of the university to assist him as his advisor on transformation, because students, if you were following events, we're calling for a faster pace of transformation, and more specifically, they wanted a decolonized higher education. And we then I worked for a year as advisor, but then went back to my own position as the general faculty. But this position as Deputy Vice Chancellor for Transformation, Student Affairs, and Social Responsiveness is a recent development.
Right. Interesting. Well, you've got a long career, that's great. And so your experience, you was in the US, America, Florida. Now, how did you find it coming from South Africa, coming to the United States? Did you feel that it was, I mean, it's great to travel. It's always great to travel. Opens your mind, see different things. How did you view come to the United States compared to where you
Yes,
came from?
yes. So this were the years 1996 to 1997,
Okay.
and we had just become a democracy in South Africa in 1994. So I left at a point where South Africa was really becoming to its own, and also known to have surmounted a very difficult political dispensation. So coming to the US, I expected that a lot would have been different in terms of Black people's struggles, because democracy was a given, right?
Yeah.
In the US. And living in Florida was quite a rude awakening, in
Okay.
that I found that it was very difficult to um, engage and socialize with Black people because I hardly saw them. So in places where I worked, the professionals were white people in the main, and the learners. So the first post that I held as a traveling therapist then was at a hospital in Tampa, Florida. And it was very clear to me then that if you were not an elderly and you were not covered by Medicare or Medicaid, one of the two,
Yeah.
I could be confusing them now. You pretty much were on your own. If you couldn't afford access to healthcare, it
Yeah.
was really difficult. And that's
Right.
when my eyes were opened to how commodifying healthcare was really a bad direction for any country,
Yeah.
because those who are poor are left behind. And when I went to the school system, so after I left Tampa, I worked in the school system. And again, it was very interesting in that I had thought that, education in the US would be one that opened young people's minds to the world. And I found that the education system was pretty much focused on the US, that young people didn't know much about the rest of the world,
That's
which
right.
I found very sad.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, now in South Africa now, you were saying that you went into the north, you were staying there in more rural area, did you say? Now,
Correct.
I look at the history of South Africa. I mean, I focus on all areas of history from the earliest times. So I recognize that we had the Khoisan in these areas very long time ago. And then I've also studied about the Bantu migration coming from, some say, Eastern Nigeria, Cameroon area, and all over sub-Saharan Africa, you know. So then after that, obviously later on, then we're gonna get the Dutch. Is it the Dutch that came first out of the Europeans, or the French, or the Portuguese? Portuguese,
Yeah.
actually, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. So from your knowledge of the history of South Africa, you could give us a little breakdown from your knowledge.
Yes, so there is contestation about the arrival of the Bantus in South Africa. And
Yeah,
I think the first point I want to raise is that Africa never had borders.
thank you. Yeah,
But this whole story of migration from one part of the continent, meaning that people do not come from a certain part of the continent does not make sense.
Yeah,
People moved around.
that's it.
And you also have people who were here who have a complexion that is shared in the majority of the continent, which we call Africa. Africa is not even the original name of the continent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. So there is also language that is a very interesting aspect of understanding history. So you have a language called isiXhosa, which has the click sound.
Click language, yeah.
Very close to Khoi and San languages.
Yeah.
So it becomes very interesting that often that is completely ignored, that you can have a whole language group, people who only speak isiXhosa, who don't speak any other language. Yet there are attempts to separate these people from the Khoi and the San.
Yeah.
Whereas these people who speak this language, isiXhosa, are direct descendants of the Khoi and the San.
Yeah.
I'm always very skeptical about the narrative of migration within Africa, because Africans moved around. This is not to say that there are not people who we call Bantu who would have moved from other parts of the continent. It is part of the whole story of movement on the continent.
Definitely.
But you are right, the Dutch people arrived after the Portuguese, and they arrived in 1652. And Jan van Riebeeck is one such explorer who is credited with the development or the establishment of the first refreshment station in the place that we now call Cape Town.
Okay, yeah. So interesting. It's got some very interesting history and different periods of time. And like you said before, Africa was borderless. From just studying Africa and myself, I can see researchers can find similar linguistics in ancient Egypt and other parts of Africa. So it's showing you that Africans didn't just stay still. We moved around, like you said, there was no borders. We were free to go where we want to go. And not only that, we've got records of Africans leaving Africa, trading with different parts of the world anyway, India, China, Europe. So this is we need to tell the story in our own narrative, where we've had people telling our history, telling us what we did. We didn't have civilizations. Even the Great Zimbabwe, when the Europeans came in, they wanted to claim it like it was a European civilization, So at the end of the day, they do the same thing with the pyramids in Egypt. They want you to believe that it was outsiders that built them. But we had great Sheikh Anta Diop, great researcher, who proved that these were Black African people that built these pyramids. So it's very important for us to speak. This is why I created this show. I created the show for Black people, African people born, and Africans of the diaspora, to be able to speak from our perspective, share our knowledge with each other. We don't need European approval to be able to tell our story. So this is why another reason why I brought you on today, and I connected with Professor Small. And I'm happy Professor Smalls has, put me onto yourself and other people's, because it's important that as a Pan-Africanist that we must connect and not have to be, we don't need the European middlemen to bring us together. We come together ourselves.
Absolutely. It was not so long ago that I learned about Imhotep. Right?
Yeah, Imhotep, yeah.
The father of medicine.
That's right, yeah.
to learn that, what we now credit as Western medicine was actually appropriated
Yeah,
from, again, Egypt,
that's right.
right?
Yeah,
And, that surgeries would be conducted even back then, and with very highly sophisticated instruments. But it is important that you have a program such as this one, because otherwise this history gets lost, and you have young people, whether they are from the continent, whether they're in the diaspora, or whether they're the rest of the world, who actually are miseducated about Africa.
yeah, definitely too much miseducation. But what the problem is a lot of our people around the world, some of us haven't seen the importance to go and find our history, and where we are in the UK or people in America, people of West Africans of the diaspora, they focus a lot more on the slave trade than they do who we were before pre-slavery. And for me, like with having Nigerian descent from my father's side, he always told me how important Africa is and which country, geographical area. Now, when we say tribe, we understand that this is a European term. I just use the word, I'm an Ijaw tribe, I might just say Ijaw people rather than say tribe. So on my mum's side, we have Trinidad, who went through the slave trade. Now, at the same time, we take on the European slave master's name. We lost our language, lost a lot part of our culture, self-identity. But this is why I've always gravitated to my Nigerian side, which is very important because I see a lot of people in America, UK, and don't know nothing really much about where they're from or the great things that we did. So especially in the city I'm in Liverpool, which a lot of people, majority focus on the transatlantic slave trade. So I'm one of the few people in this city who's promoting real Pan-Africanism and dealing with it from take back our values, our spirituality. It's been demonized, and all the great civilizations and the great things that we did. A lot of negativity gets focused over in the West, and they have their own story of what they believe Africa is like. And it's just basically watching the TV, being brainwashed, and even going to school. The school system can't teach us nothing about Africa. They only teach us like the bad things Africa needs. It is hungry. Africa didn't have civilization. So it's important that we try to network with Africans all around the world. This is very important. Even when Africans come to the UK, it's important that they connect with the Black people born here and vice versa, because sometimes there's a disconnection with Africans when they come to America or Africans who come to the UK. But I'm always open to make that connection because we all one people. And this is why I started this show. I felt like this is a great way for us to be able to connect worldwide. So that's why I'd like to speak on that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up the whole notion of spirituality.
Oh, it's important, yeah.
For me, that's where it all starts.
Yeah.
Because with the enslavement of people, and this is not only just with regards to Africa, but everywhere where people were colonized, there was a lot of damage done first to their spirituality, to their sense of being close to the Creator.
Yeah.
And Africa is still trying to find itself spiritually.
Yeah.
And you can look around many parts of Africa where there is still some presence of spiritual elders, that you have communities that have a level of dignity to who they are that is not easy to strip away.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even when everything seems lost, what I am seeing find revival in terms of spiritual reawakening through music.
Yeah.
That's really, really amazing. And I think that even in the absence or having people having forgotten their language, the language of music is a very powerful way to connect African people all over the world.
Definitely.
Because it does not matter where you are, there are certain sounds when played as rhythm, it speaks to your soul. It could be music from Mali, from Senegal, from Zimbabwe. I mean, you have people, for instance, recently being very excited about Amapiano. I don't know if you've heard of Amapiano.
I don't
It's
think
a genre of music that has really taken South Africa by storm, and it's getting reach globally, and with some in the US often thinking that it's Nigerian, which, I mean, I don't complain about that. The fact is, there's a signature to African music that says this is of the continent. And Amapiano brings alive some sounds that in some ways, from generations before us.
Yeah.
And young people have found a way to translate that music into contemporary beats, so whether it's fused with Afrobeat or even house, but there's a distinct signature that says, I know who I am.
Yeah.
And for me, that knowledge of self that is linked to one's sense of spirituality and connectedness to the higher being, to other humans, to the various ecosystems, to the land. You can't break it. You can't break it. And I was just reminded of that when you were speaking, and also how music is central to that.
Very important music, definitely. Like you said, the rhythm, the vibration, and there's many things that I'd love to see the reawakening of our spirituality. I mean, like you said, it's the colonialism all around the world as well. I travel a lot. I've been all the continents. I visit indigenous peoples. That's what I do. And I found in Aboriginal Australians, they were very spiritual people. Unfortunately, they've still there, the spiritual element's still there, but you can see that they've put westernized religion being pushed on them. And also some of them might have they've took on the habits of alcoholics and drugs and stuff. So, and then other people I went to the Fiji Islands, and in Fiji I found them very spiritual, and they say they came from Africa. They always speak very proudly, highly of Africa. And right through Asia, I went through to Southeast Asia, and you have the indigenous Black people who are still there, who reached these places about 40 to 50,000 years ago. Now, there's only small numbers of these people. I had to go into the rainforest, 7-hour drives through in Thailand, in Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia. And it's amazing to see these people still there to this day. And it's almost looking at connecting with our people in Africa, because they're living. And this makes me wonder that when people first left Africa to move around the planet, it's obvious that they would have been spiritual already in Africa before they left. So sometimes people, these European scientists, are their spirituality only developed in the last few thousand years or something, where when they left Africa in the beginning, they took it with them. That's, because I see similarities different places in the world. And then obviously when European religions and all Abraham's religions being imposed on them, then you can see the slight change of the whole landscape of the countries. So definitely very important spirituality, and that's wherever you're from, spirituality. But people got to recognize the birthplace of all humanity, which is Africa, and also the first civilizations that started in Africa. And I think the more people hopefully are going to wake up, become a re-education needs to happen. But we have to realize ourselves how important it is in larger numbers. We have numbers of peoples like ourselves, and there's so many others, but we need more people to wake up. And I understand that there's people that are just trying to survive in different places of the world, but very important to know who you are, knowledge yourself. Definitely.
Yeah. Yes. So another story that I think you'll find interesting about South Africa is the role of Shaka Zulu as a political figure, and how history has been distorted to portray him as a warmonger and someone who was bloodthirsty and murdered a number of his people.
Yeah, I'm happy you're bringing up this, because we have got some people over in the West that when you speak about Shaka Zulu, they'll say that he was just killing his own people. So if you could continue what you're saying.
Yes, so my understanding from other sources of history is that Shaka's dream was to unite people, across what we call South Africa now, but also southern parts of Africa that include Zimbabwe, and that he was seen as a threat by the colonialists, and he had to be demonized so that this campaign for him to unify people is thwarted. And the source that is cited in telling a narrative of Shaka Zulu that is consistent with oral history told by his people is a piece of music by Professor Mzilikazi Kumalo. If it's something that you can look up and perhaps have someone translate the music, it's written. So the history is written in the music. And it's fascinating, and also beautiful piece of music. Of course, it's Zulu. That's the written language and the music that tells this story, and also the role of women in kingship. Often it's distorted. Where you see these men portrayed as patriarchs, when in fact women played a critical role in succession of kings and chiefs. In my own language group, Chivenda, the aunt, so the sister to the one who could be king, is the most important person within royal families. Nothing gets done until the aunt has declared that it can be done. And that speaks again to the role that women play in many African societies in terms of making sure that leadership is not one that is expressed through brute force.
Balance.
But that leadership is about being a custodian of what the people's wishes are. And it's, there are stories of how, traditional populations would deal with a leader who no longer was serving in the interest of their people.
Yeah.
In that the aunt would declare that, something must be done.
More of a matriarchal system rather than the patrilineal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And going back to Shaka Zulu, he lived at a time when, when, population groups or language groups or different parts of, what we otherwise call a tribe went into war, there were no fatalities.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing of warfare was almost like a dance.
Yeah.
Right? So you challenge the others in various forms. And sometimes, dance is part of it, where the one troop dances to outdo the other, but there's also the throwing of spears. So designed in such a way that you have to throw them from afar, from a distance. And if you run out of your spears before the other group, you hand yourself over. You're defeated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What would also happen is that you got absorbed by the other group. They didn't kill you.
Yeah.
They didn't kill you. So it was always about becoming a bigger grouping rather than, killing the other side.
Yeah. That's it. Interesting, because we, like I say, we've got to research our own history and we must connect globally, which I think is very important to create more of an impact because there's too much separation in the Caribbean, America, Europe, Africa. But I do believe I can see it slowly coming together. It's slowly coming together, it doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen. Now, there was a person from South Africa I interviewed, Tau Haranuba. I'm not sure if you heard of him. He's always on a show called Unpopular Opinions in South Africa. Yeah, I spoke to them both. Have you watched the Unpopular Opinions?
I will look for it because I've not heard of. But I guess with my job, it's very difficult to find time to catch up with everything that's happening in the world. But podcasts are my absolute favorite.
Well, one of the reasons why I had Tau Haranuba on was because he deals with spirituality really, really strongly, like grandmaster type. So he had like a very important that because not everyone has a great deal of knowledge on spirituality. Some people deal with it on a basic level, but he seemed like he knew quite a bit. He was making connections with ancient Egypt, even the name Bantu, the first couple of letters, Ba, and then the NTU, we recognize that in Egypt. So it's important that, like I say, not everyone is like me in the city, who I am an explorer. I'm deep into the history, spirituality, migrations, culture, languages, all the different linguistics. So it's important that we make these connections. But it's been great speaking to you, though. Really appreciate it.
And one of these days, when one of my doctoral students is done, Nkosenati Koela, I'm sure you would enjoy talking to him. He's looking at the practice of what he calls ngoma.
Okay.
It's linked to divination. Through sound and fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating stuff. And drawing from Credo Mtwa.
Credo Mtwa, if you know anyone who's quite educated in these areas, I've introduced them to me and they're all definitely welcome on the show.
I will. I'll just wait until he passes his PhD because
Okay,
he must focus.
he's got to
But
focus.
he's got to focus, but he's got a wealth of information about
Powerful.
sound from this part of Africa, but with connections throughout the African diaspora.
Yeah,
And the healing qualities that
yeah,
are found in sound produced as part of ritual
yeah.
in African tradition.
Well, I'll be very interested anyway. Hopefully, gets that PhD done. Because I definitely want him on the show. And I really want to thank you today, Elelwani. I really appreciate your time. Your efforts, all your qualifications. We need people like yourself, and it's great for you to connect with people from the African diaspora anyway.
Thank
So,
you, thank you, thank you.
well, thank
Really
you very much. This is James Diboe, Discovering, dedicated to regional peoples, and thank you very much, Elelwani. We'll get this uploaded soon, and I'll send you the video on YouTube.
thank you.
You have a great day.
You too.
Peace
Bye-bye.
and blessings. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.